Hey everybody, thanks for joining me on The Empty Theater, episode 15. I am Brody, and in this episode, we'll be taking a look at the recent release, Steve Jobs, directed by Danny Boyle, written by Aaron Sorkin, starring Michael Fassbender, Kate Winslet, Jeff Daniels, and Seth Rogen.
I wasn't saying you slept with 28% of American men. I was using an algorithm based on the blood test, which said there was a 94.1% chance that I'm the father.
You're trying to publicly paint me as a slut and a whore.
Believe me, I'm not trying to publicly do anything with you.
Now, the big problem I have with the biopic genre is that they are generally a lazy effort to do good work. Don't get me wrong, everybody from the top down, the director, the writer, the actors, the costume designers, production designers, everyone does a good job. The finished product is a very by-the-numbers product. Yeah, Ray and Walk the Line and Theory of Everything were all fantastically made films, but were just too broad in their scope that they felt a little flat. Then you have films like last year's Selma, 2007 Zodiac, and now Steve Jobs that take a more focused lens to the real stories, so there isn't this bloated backstory about how every one of these people ended up where we already knew they ended up. You have Martin Luther King Jr. specifically at the Selma March. You have Inspector Tashi, Robert Graysmith, and Paul Avery specifically in the investigation of the Zodiac Killer. You have Steve Jobs specifically on his expulsion and subsequent return to Apple.
Why do people who were adopted feel like they were rejected instead of selected?
I don't feel rejected.
You're sure?
Very sure.
Because it's not like the baby is born and the parents look and say, nah, we're not interested in this one. On the other hand, someone did choose you.
By having that narrow focus on a very specific period in Steve Jobs' life, Sorkin is able to move around just a bit better and create really good dramatic tension between Jobs and the other people in his life, like Wozniak, Scully, his ex-girlfriend, and their possible daughter. So rather than getting a stock life story of how Jobs became Jobs, you get what amounts to be a really good corporate drama, that just happens to be based in real life. And it's all about how his work life and his personal life, weaved in and out of each other. I should add that as with any cinematic representation of real people and real events, a very large grain of salt is required, a required viewing accessory to seeing Steve Jobs. I'm not saying one version of the events happened or the other, whether one person was right or the other person was wrong. What I am saying is that Aaron Sorkin was able to create events based on real events and make them cinematically interesting.
You don't think you're having a bizarre overreaction to a 19-year-old girl allowing her mother to list her own house?
She could have tried.
She's supposed to stop her mother, that particular mother, from living
She gave
wherever
Kazan
the
her
hell
blessing to sell the house, and she did it despite me.
I don't care if she put a pipe bomb in the water heater. You're going to fix it now.
Fassbender was fantastic as Steve Jobs. He dove headfirst into Jobs' obsession with his work and really captured the indifference that Jobs seemed to have with the people around him and the events around him if it wasn't his work. And to everyone's credit, they never demonized anyone. No one was made out to be the real villain, any real villain, in the story of Steve Jobs. It's just an unfortunate series of events that played out as they did. Winslet, Daniels, and Rogen all deserve very high praise for bringing these real people as characters to cinematic life and aid in enhancing the complexity of the situations highlighted in the film. That it wasn't just Jobs being overbearing, that it wasn't just Wozniak feeling underappreciated, and that it wasn't just Scully being in over his head.
You can't write code. You're not an engineer. You're not a designer. You can't put a hammer to a nail. I built the circuit board. The graphical interface was stolen from Xerox PARC. Jeff Raskin was the leader of the Mac team before you threw him off his own project. Everything, someone else designed the box. So how come 10 times in a day, I read Steve Jobs as a genius?
Ultimately, Steve Jobs is a biopic worth seeing. It's less a rose-colored view of the high and low points of a man's life, skimming across the important parts like a pebble on the pond, and more a thorough examination of a tumultuous period of a well-regarded man's life and how it all weaves together. That was Steve Jobs. This has been The Empty Theater. I am Brody, and thanks for watching. Hey everyone, if you're enjoying The Empty Theater, you can subscribe to us down below. Also, you can follow me on Twitter and like us on Facebook so you never miss an episode. Thanks for watching, and be excellent to each other.